Hey, thanks for joining me. We're getting back into Wildcats. I kind of forgot about it. I mean, I've been going through every issue, and that's kind of one of my things on this channel is I like to take a series and why not just go through every damn issue? I don't think I've completed anything that was like going on long term. Like I've completed like Danger Girl. That only went 7 issues. We'll complete Battle Chasers here shortly. That only went, what, 9 issues. But some of these books that go for an extended run, making my way through Pit, we're doing Tom Strong, we're doing Planetary, we've done Cyberforce. I got to go dig out the next run after Silvestri's taken off. I think he hands it off to David Finch to draw, and I can't remember who is writing it. But I got to go dig up those to continue Cyberforce. But Wildcats, it's been about 2 months, if I looked at my calendar right, from the last time we did issue 18. So what the hell has been going on in the recent story building up to this? Fuck if I can remember. The Jim Lee left the book, him and Brandon Choi. Thank God Brandon Choi left. And they handed it over to the new creative team, James Robinson and Travis Charest. And I mentioned every time I was going over a book with this new creative team, I keep saying it got good suddenly. And again, that's kind of a opinion, you know. I mean, you're never going to have a bad time when Jim Lee's drawing the book. But Travis Charest, when he started on, it was like issue 14, 15. He had been doing some other stuff for Wildstorm, and it looked good. But he just, like, rose to the challenge, and his artwork just became a whole new thing. And with every issue, page by page, issue by issue, you could just see growth in his work. And he accelerated extremely fast. And they had a storyline where they focused on some of the just regular government soldiers that the Wildcats had interacted with in the past, rather than the Wildcats team themselves. And that was kind of an interesting story, bringing it back to a random little single panel that happened in issue 2. And then that all culminated with the idea that the government team found out that the Wildcats had a imposter traitor in their midst. And it was a little bit of a misdirection. We thought it was going to be Grifter, but it ended up being Maul, and he was one of these alien shapeshifter guys, and no one knew. And they exposed the imposter. But then they're like, okay, once we solved that, and they rescued some innocent people and all the kind of normal comic book, you know, stuff you get in these superhero books, the Wildcats were like, well, where the fuck is Maul? Where's he at? And so they ended up going and finding him. He ended up getting in possession of Stormwatch. They had him. And then there was it kind of got a little bit less focused, where there's some alien creature that has some information of some big, crazy, important thing is going to be going on. And Grifter was out searching and digging up information while the Wildcats were getting Maul. Grifter was out looking. He comes back and reports back saying, hey, I found out this guy, I think it's Hightower is this alien's name. He's hooked up with these alien gangsters or something to that effect. And they're teamed up with the Coda, the same alien race as Zealot from the Wildcats, a bunch of Amazonian, hyper-violent, hyper-deadly warrior babes that are super, like, skilled fighters. And so the Wildcats are like, well, we got to go get some information from all these people. But they're like, Hightower, Daemonites, the Coda, we got a big-ass fight on our hands. And that's what this issue is. So we get a cover from Travis Charest. It's fine. For the level of rendering and detail that Travis Charest is capable of, this is not his finest work. Again, any comic artist would probably be thrilled to produce something that looks like this, but I'm just kind of comparing it against what Travis Charest could have done and what he'll end up being able to do in the future. This is kind of an open line, not a lot of rendering, not a lot of shadows, and just kind of a standard, like, hero and villain fighting, just kind of locked in battle. It's fine. It's no big deal. But we get a big whole issue of Wildcats fighting bad guys. Well, I can't remember, because This was made back in 95. So, you know, I was 18 years old in high school, 47 now. So I don't remember how I kind of remembered flipping this book open, and if I knew in advance or if I was shocked to see that Jim Lee drew this issue. So as I understand it, this is Jim Lee coming back to draw an issue of Wildcats for the first time since he left on, I think, again, was it 13 or 14 was his last issue, and this is issue 19, so not a long time, 5-6 months, you know, something to that effect. But Jim Lee's back, but it's also a little different. So the story is James Robinson, and it lists it layouts. Jim Lee finishes Richard Bennett. It just says Bennett, you know, but it's Richard Bennett yeah, right there, Richard Bennett. The guy who drew Brass. I've already reviewed that series, and I actually got my hands on this Gen 13 issue called Wired that I had no idea he did, and I just barely got it in the mail a couple days ago, flipping through that. Holy shit. That guy's level of detail is just on a whole other level. We'll be looking at it soon, I promise. But, so Jim Lee's drawing it, and normally when you get Jim Lee, it's been Scott Williams with a few exceptions ever since he started on X-Men, Uncanny X-Men years ago when this was made, from the time that this was made. And Jim Lee and Scott Williams are synonymous, and they're almost like, they're just like they go hand in hand. But on occasion you get Art T-Bear inking Jim Lee, or somebody else, you know, and Scott Williams probably needs a break, you know. Jim Lee might be able to go for a long stretch, but, you know, schedules don't line up, whatever the case may be. I don't know anything. But occasionally you get different inkers, but whatever the case was on this, it's not Scott Williams finishing, it's Richard Bennett. And when it says layouts and finishes, not that I know from personal experience, but in the industry, having read up, learned up, and having the ear of inker Chuck Gibson, who worked for the company, he's kind of explained this. So, I mean, I kind of know, you know, I kind of knew, but he kind of explains it. Layouts in comics world basically means it's not full pencils, meaning the penciler's not going in and putting all the shading in. He's probably doing very limited, like cross-hatching. I guess it could vary depending on the artist, what layouts mean and the level to which a finisher needs to bring the final artwork to its ultimate conclusion in the printed book. It depends on how much the penciler does. I think layouts could be very, very rough, sketchy stuff and hand it over to an inker. But in the case of this, I remember looking at it, and I can tell instantly this is not the same Jim Lee. It's just that the textures and the ink lines, it is not the same guy as Scott Williams. Now, I'm not saying that that's better or worse. It's just very different. And I was in love with Jim Lee's work for years and years. I've talked about this often, how once he got onto Image Comics and Wildcats, his artwork changed a bit, and it wasn't my favorite version. His Uncanny X-Men era is my favorite. And but he's still incredibly talented. But I know what Scott Williams inks on Jim Lee look like, and it is not this. This is very different. So having old Chuck Gibson kind of explain it to me also, if you go look at Chuck Gibson's channel, he has, because he worked for Wildstorm as an inker, he has several videos where he pulls out papers and photocopies of works that he was able to get his hands on from this era while he worked in the studio, if I understand correctly, and Chuck will correct me in the comments if I get this wrong, but they had a photocopier on site, and when you're in a studio setting, when everyone just brings their penciled pages in, penciled or inked or whatever, if you want to just have copies of them, or you wanted to learn, you could go take the original artwork, throw it on the copy machine, and just take your own copies. And Chuck kept a massive pile of stuff. And many of the pages that are in this issue, you can see, I think he's got variations on both pencils and then the inks by Richard Bennett. And when you can see the Jim Lee pencils, it's all solid figure work. It's like it's Jim Lee solid figure work. It looks great. All the indications of all the details are there, but there's like all this dark rendering, like you see through this forearm here, for example. Stuff like that is not in there. All these weird, gritty, and when I say weird, I mean awesome, like gritty textures in this gun here. Those are not there in the rendering. It's just kind of like the basic skeletal framework. Like it's very advanced, it's very good because it's Jim Lee, but it's not finished pencils with full shading and full cross-hatching and full rendering to where he has a tighter control of the finished look, and then you hand it over to an inker and expect them to be very faithful to your pencils. In the case of layouts and then finishes, the inker's given a broader opportunity to bring the final look of the work closer to what he wants it to look like. And that's why you get this very different looking final artwork when Richard Bennett inks Jim Lee. And they've inked, Richard Bennett's inked Jim Lee several times. There's been some issues of Wildcats previous to this, but this kind of feels like, in a way, like the ultimate expression of the combination of Jim Lee and Richard Bennett. So go look at Chuck Gibson's channel, go look through some of his videos, and he's got a couple of them. I can't remember off the top of my head as I speak right now what he titled them, flipping through old, photocopies, and you can see him flipping through them and showing where he's showing the photocopies of the very, very cool but very kind of lightly penciled pages by Jim Lee, and then the finishes by Richard Bennett on top. It's really neat. It's really fun to see. But now that we get a chance to get into the book, as I explained before, how the team has a big fight on their hands. So I really love this silent kind of multi-panel layout of all the team getting ready for battle. You got Warblade, you got Voodoo, you got Zealot, Spartan, and Grifter. And it's all kind of like focusing on their hands as they like strapping gear down. Like Grifter's, racking a chamber in his weird laser gun. Spartan's got his robotic arm open doing whatever the fuck. Zealot's strapping down some things on her thighs. Zealot's zipping up her suit here. I love like the way her face is blackened in, the red lips and the long hair flowing. Chuck Gibson, if you're watching, I'm sure you probably are. This top panel caught me instantly when I flipped this book open. It's Warblade, but he's got his liquid metal, like silver jizz goo stuff coming out of him, spiraling around the hands, which is very similar to the pages you helped me with on my fan comic, where the character has the liquid metal weapon that just, sits on the outside of his skin, but when he wants to deploy it, we have it swirl around his hands and form different metal shapes. I saw this and I was instantly like, oh my God, that's kind of like what we were doing. I think that ours looked better, Chuck, and it's not because of my pencils. It's because of your badass inks on the liquid metal that you did on the guy's hand with the textures. I'm just saying, I think the one that we come up with looked better than this panel. Now, that's just one panel, you know what I mean? Just one. I'll take any little microscopic victory I can find. I just think we did a little bit better job. It's kind of a funny little aside right there. I just caught that, and it's very similar to a thing that goes on in my own fan comic. But anyway, Wildcats getting ready for battle. You got Emp, old Jacob Marlowe, and Void looking kind of cool with this heavy shadows on Void in the background and that silver kind of outfit of hers. It's kind of a solid, it looks really cool. I wonder how much of that shading was put in there by Jim Lee's pencils, or if Richard Bennett kind of decided to do that. But anyway, they're like, okay, everyone ready? We got a big battle. Let's get going. So we get a couple pages of setup. It's like some club in Washington, D.C. We're surrounded by hot babes. And then you got Hightower, the alien Damonite guy, surrounded by Coda. And like I said, there are a bunch of hot babes that are like the most deadly assassins you can find. And, just looking at it, I'm going to say this a lot, but look, if you know Jim Lee's work, you look at this and you can go, that's Jim Lee figure work, but it's a very different finish. There's just an entirely different kind of texture to everything. And again, if you can see the pencils that Jim Lee put down, I mean, he's got the head and the hair and the arms and the clothes, but it's left open, and he doesn't get in here and render these shadows. He probably didn't put any of this like heavy rendering in the lips. He probably just drew the lips out and then lets Richard Bennett finish the shit out of it. Now, I don't know that for a fact on this page specifically, but it's something like that, where you can see the layouts that Jim Lee put down. Again, any artist in the world would love to be able to just have Jim Lee's layout ability, to say nothing of his finished pencils. But this is where Richard Bennett takes over and just brings it home, man. He just makes it a new thing. It's like a new version of Jim Lee. So Hightower's there talking with all the Coda babes. There's a big thing they're trying to set up. Some big scary thing's going to be happening. This is all the lead up to something. And so Hightower's talking with the Coda babes. And then suddenly, boom, double page spread. Void teleports the Wildcats in, just right into the middle of this club, right above everybody. I always thought that this perspective shot on Void here was really good. And when you see the pencil versions of this over on Chuck's channel, like, it looks fantastic. Just that Jim Lee's able to kind of render a figure like this with the head way up in the foreground at this hard angle and the body going down into the distance. That is something. That is a hard angle to do, and he nailed it. But from a story perspective, I like how the Wildcats just jump into the middle of this club and they just start murdering people. Void teleports the civilians out of the club. So they address that, thank you, that they get the customers out of there. So the only people that are left are alien Daemonites and Coda warrior babes. And so they just start unloading. I always like this shot of Zealot doing a jump kick sword slash. I feel like I've seen this pose on Psylocke in X-Men somewhere. I'm not complaining. I'm not saying that's a negative, but that's pretty badass. But boom, here are the Wildcats. Let's go. Let us do battle. Boom. Giant, almost splash page. Warblade with this low angle looking up, just ramming his claws through this Coda girl's guts, just stabbing her to death. There's no ethical superhero dilemma in this fucking comic. This is the Wildcats. They're a covert action team, and they're here to fucking murder Coda babes. They're going to just kill the shit out of them. This angle on this girl with her head, and then her, like, this is her ass up here, and then her thigh and her knee and her foot coming down. That is a hard perspective to do. But, man, he nailed the shit out of it. You got Voodoo in the background, some kind of like Darth Maul double-bladed lightsaber, something or other. One of the Coda jumps in the air. She's like, you're trained by the Coda. Like, Coda trained, are you? And Voodoo says, by better than you, bitch. Because Voodoo used to be absolutely useless. Like, when you met her in the comics back in issue 1, she was just like a 19-year-old stripper that got wrapped up in the Wildcats universe. And eventually, Chris Claremont come along and wrote a couple issues and put Voodoo on the path to being trained by Zealot so she can actually be a fighter. And so I guess now she can take on the Coda girls, who the actual Coda, like, I think there's some humans that are trained as Coda. I might be wrong. The Coda themselves are alien races. You know, it's an alien race. So whether or not this is a human one or an actual alien one, the alien ones are like centuries old. They can live for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. So, well, maybe we'll have to say that's one of the human ones, because if Voodoo is able to take her on, that's the only explanation. Maybe I'm just overthinking the shit out of it. Spartan here, shoving this girl in the back. And then these are some of the more fun action scenes I've seen Jim Lee do in a while. Again, at this point, he had been, on a sabbatical for a chunk of time. But, the choices of the angles and the action and the bullets hitting, and then Richard Bennett just nailing it on the finishes. But yeah, bullets, flying everywhere, the Coda jumping up to fight back, bullets just flying everywhere. Coda babe, I like this shot of her right there. Screamy face, she's jumping in the air, her arms coming back, the sword. All these details. And again, when you see some of these gun details, like on the weapons, the guns, the swords. That's really Richard Bennett. Like these little handguns up here, there's such crazy awesome detail on that. And that Jim Lee didn't put all that detail in there. This is Richard Bennett nailing it. So jumping through the air. I love this shot. You know, it may not make sense from like a logical storytelling perspective, but these are comic books and we want them to look visually awesome. So you take the opportunity to take the badass zealot and put her in a sexy ass pose where you get the curve of the body, get the boobs out there, the tiny waist and the hips and the butt. And she's throwing up like it's like maybe she's throwing up gangster Wildcat signs. She's like, you know, West Side Wildcats represent. We fuck Coda bitches in the asses. And then chops her head off. So I love that shot. I love that. I mean, it's a weird hand gesture, but I like it. I like the sword coming up here, slicing the girl's head off. Another great, you know, awesome action pose where you get all the sexy curve in the body because these are comics and they're hot girls and this is what we want to see. The alien Damonite Hightower, he's like, oh, fuck this shit. I'm out of there. Back over here, Void teleporting the civilian customers out of the way. Great low angle and these buildings in the background. Great shot, the perspective on Void's body there. Another low angle perspective. Jimmy's, you know, pushing things. Like he can do this stuff, but I don't know, it just kind of stands out to me. She falls to the ground, more of her little silver liquid metal jizz outfit, whatever it is, you know, I think that liquid metal stuff falling around. I don't think we've ever seen her have this kind of rendered this way before. I like that Jim Lee, you know, put that in there. I also like that Jim Lee has her fall to the ground in a way where she lands, where again, we get the nice tiny waist and a big, beautiful, sexy ass shot, even as she's falling, holding onto garbage to keep herself from cracking her skull. But, and you know, just this little shot, sometimes I talk about this, these little angles, that shot of Void on the ground right there, that's just the basic figure drawing. The pose of the head and the positioning of the shoulders, the upper body, and then pivoting those hips around and getting those legs on there like that. Just that little tiny drawing like that. I think it looks so good. I absolutely love that. A little tiny figure drawing. In the face of like all this great sexy shit with her big juicy ass sticking in her face, that little figure, I love that. I think it looks so fantastic. But she's having a little bit of like a, I don't know, a seizure or some shit. She's like, Jacob, and she just stops. She's like, what? So we get kind of a big splash page, and it says, Void's powers are vague still to her. To Marlowe's scientists, I think to the writers too, it's never been really defined what the fuck it is that Void can do. And so it's just like, well, I guess she could do whatever the fuck the story needs. But it's basically showing a bunch of characters from the Wildstorm universe. They're building towards, I think this is like the preamble to a big Wildstorm crossover event that's going to happen that ultimately kind of ends up being not a big deal, kind of who cares. Some big villain I don't think we've been introduced to yet. Trying to remember this little fucker's name. But anyway, it's like a building up to a crossover that's coming. Back with here, she kind of comes out of her little kind of seizure state. Again, Jim Lee's giving us the curve and those big, nice, thick, juicy ass shots. And she's like, I had a vision going back to the beginning of the Wildcats, but something horrible is coming. It's desperate. It's desperate we return. It's terrible. What's coming? A dire future. So again, they're building up to some big crossover that we're supposed to give a shit about. And I can't remember what it is, and so for me, it's obviously not that big a deal because I don't fucking remember what it is, so who cares? Meanwhile, back to the fight. There's Maul, the most useless, dumb, boring, strong guy in any super team ever. I know if you like Maul, if he's your boy, if you like big purple monsters with tusks on their back that get dumber as they get bigger, great. I'm glad for you. The more I see him in the comics, the more I fucking hate him. The Coda are still fighting, but now all the bitches are running down into they got them on the run. The Wildcats got them on the run. They're going down into like the basement of the place, I guess. I love this low angle shot, looking, down low, looking up as Zealot. She's just got a giant machine gun, just blowing people away, just trying to murder the shit out of everybody. I like that, I like that the Wildcats are just showing up to murder. We're not going to like give them the opportunity to stop and think about what you did and surrender and we'll take you to the authority. Like, no, they're just showing up to kill. We're going to blow them all away. I actually kind of dig that. They notice how the Coda are saying, run to the basement, arm the charge. And they're like, oh shit, they probably got a bomb in the basement, so we better stop them. So again, double page spread. Look at this shit. This is Jim Lee on fire, but Richard Bennett just making it work. I like right here, you got this girl. You got Grifter shooting her, blowing bullets through her body. And at the same time, you got Warblade up here in his stupid outfit. But he's like just doing like a slashing with his hands, chopping her arms off. So she's getting it from two angles here. Like, I mean, that's how I read it. Grifter's shooting her. That's what, he's shooting here. And then there's bullet, exit wounds coming out of her there. And then Warblade's cutting her arm off. Stupid Maul's in the background. He's got a couple of Coda bitches just hanging on him. He doesn't care. I like that Zealot's over here just diving. She's holding her sword in the air. She's got that giant machine gun blowing away this girl as she's like racking the slide on her gun. I like the detail on that. Like, if you know how guns work, you got to change you run out of bullets, so you change the magazine, you slap a new magazine in, you got to pull the slide back. And then again, Richard Bennett putting in all these textures on these guns. It's fantastic. And then all these backgrounds. Again, I don't know how much of that Jim Lee put in the pencils, but this is one of my more favorite shots of Warblade. I talk about him all the time. I don't mind the character, generally speaking, though he has nothing about his character that's a really big deal. Like, what is the defining characteristic of Warblade? He's liquid metal. That's his defining characteristic. There's nothing about him that we fucking care about. Maul, he's can be a human and grow bigger. The bigger he gets, the dumber he gets. I mean, like, these are one-dimensional characters that have very little characterization. And I've hated Warblade's stupid outfit with these pipes that do nothing. They don't make any sense except, quote, unquote, look cool. They don't look cool to me. And then his green ponytail is so 90s. But I like that he's a violent murderer, chopping people up. Meanwhile, Spartan has got Voodoo with him, and I like that she's like holding on to him, this kind of dark silhouette, as they go down the stairs, an angle, and flying into it, blows one of the Coda girls away. Voodoo jumps off and starts kicking at the Coda bitches. Like, the Wildcats are out for blood. Like, this is some serious shit. The Coda girl, this is funny. This Coda bitch right here, she got shot in the gut and her arm chopped off. She's still not dead. She kicks Warblade right in the fucking balls. Just this big long leg shot, boom, crushes his little liquid nuts. So that's funny to give you an idea of how much of a bunch of badasses the Coda can be. She's been shot and she's missing an arm. You can even see the bloody stump over there. And she'll still fucking crush your testicles. Voodoo charges up, still just shoving the gun into the guts of this girl and just emptying the magazine into her guts. Love it. Got a nice big round juicy booty shot. Thank you, Jim Lee. This was kind of interesting. It's the one part of this entire book where the drawings kind of, there's a part of it, this forearm, the foreshortening on this arm, the forearm muscles, the connection of this. It's fine-ish. It looks like a Rob Liefeld muscular drawing in a way, meaning it sucks. But it's kind of weird. I just feel like either Jim Lee dropped the ball or Richard Bennett dropped the ball or something like that. I don't know. There's so much beautiful shit going on with these big action scenes elsewhere. It's kind of a non-issue, but it did stand out. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But they're like, hey, the Wildcats showed up. They're kicking our asses. So they're like, well, you better kill yourselves. Blow the place up. You may die, but take them out with you. So back to more action scenes. I love this. Grifter's up here. He's got one of the Coda bitches in like a choke hold. And then he's got this other girl. He's busting a bottle across her face. She's bleeding out. Like she's got this like weapon in her hand of like, it's like Wolverine type claws. It's like just a thing you put in your hand to chop people up. You got Voodoo in the back there beating the shit out of more Coda bitches. So, but the Wildcats see, like, they're trying to do something. Like, we got to get to her. They're trying to charge through. Grifter's reaching with his hands. The Coda bitches are holding him back. And the one Coda girl here, she's like, well, let's go. That's it. So she's got like a garage door opener or something. I don't know. But she pushes a button. Boom. Giant explosion. So they blow up the place. And there's like every inking technique I think you could imagine going on this smoke up here. There's like cross-hatching with probably, I assume, a Hunt 102, brushwork, dry brushwork, screen tones. Like, Richard Bennett does not take any shortcuts. He puts in the effort and the time for hyper-detailed work. It's crazy good. Giant explosion. The dust is settling. And, of course, somehow the Wildcats survive. You know, they're like, yeah, that was close, you know. Everyone here? Like, yeah, well, there's Zealot, there's Grifter, there's Warblade, there's Maul, and where's Spartan and Voodoo? They were right next to the fucking... Oh, there they are. Well, I guess they're fine. But then, off screen, we see a Wildcats. Disable your weaponry and surrender now. Well, who's going to be over here? Double page spread. Stormwatch. I have yet to get into Stormwatch from the original first several issues. I've got them. I just haven't run across them. I've done a few things on them. I did the Stormwatch Aliens crossover. And I'm collecting up the best works, which is where Warren Ellis takes over Stormwatch towards the end of their run for several issues, writing the best issues of Stormwatch that ever existed. And then he cancels it and spins it off into the Authority. And so I've got a lot of Stormwatch to go over. I've got a huge chunk of the original run of these characters at the beginning. And then there was a point where I stopped collecting it. Then I started hearing about this great new stuff going on with this Warren Ellis guy. And so I've got some of them. I've been collecting currently some of the more important stories to get into it. But Stormwatch, it's like the secondary team. Like, you have Youngblood, you have Team Youngblood. You have Cyberforce, and you had codename Strike Force or some shit like that. You had Savage Dragon, you had Freak Force. Wildcats and Stormwatch. And Stormwatch is like the government kind of funded United Nations, like all the nations of the world, giving a superhero from, like, this guy's from Japan, and he's from Scotland, and I don't fucking know. He's from Russia because, of course, he's got the ice powers. Roll call. I don't know who the fuck this character's name is. I know that that's Jackson King. That's Battalion's younger brother, but I can't remember what the hell he would call himself. I just had his name in my head. I can't think of it. It's some snow-based power thing. Fahrenheit, Diva, Fuji, Hellstrike, and whatever the fuck that guy's name is. Oh my God, you'll tell me in the comments. You'll all make fun of me, and you should. But to be continued in Wildstorm Rising Part 1. So that's the build-up that we were getting at in the splash page back here when Void was having a little fucking freak out. This is terrible, what's coming in dire future, and it's Wildstorm Rising. I don't remember it. But Stormwatch showing up. The second most boring giant strong guy on a super team ever with Fuji. He's just a big guy that can punch, but all he does, like everyone else, is to get punched around. And then the end. That's the end of that book. There's a backup story by James Robinson, Terry Dodson pencils, Gary Martin inks. It's good artwork, but it just stands out as just not the same from Wildstorm stuff that you would kind of expect. Very good, very competent, very skilled. Gary Martin's a good inker. I've seen him do some stuff, and I've always thought he had a really nice, clean, controlled line. But Terry Dodson, I didn't appreciate him at this era. I have learned to, but it just kind of stands out. I'm like, this is a weird little backup story. But anyway, yeah, James Robinson story, layouts, Jim Lee finishes, Richard Bennett. I remember getting that book and digging the shit out of it. I'm like, man, this is a big, violent, just gore fest. And I bet Jim Lee had a fun time doing it, because he didn't have to spend all kinds of time doing all the rendering on it, but he still got to compose all these kind of fun action shots. And then Richard Bennett nailed the shit out of it. I love Travis Charest, but considering what's in this book, that's not a great cover. It's a little bit of a letdown in terms of how good it could be. It's fine. It could be better. But anyway, that's all I've got. Wildcats, number 19. Jim Lee come back for an issue. Good times, you know. they just take it to a more violent extreme than the book had ever really done before, and I'm kind of here for it. I kind of dig it. So that's all I've got for now. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I will see you next time.